From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Live Chat. Paul Mancano and Danielle Allentuck. Danielle, we are once again live here to discuss baseball, and we can't even get to baseball for the longest time because we have more important news, more state government, city government news to get to when it comes to this franchise. But that's kind of how it's been over the last couple of months, the first couple of months of the offseason. Hopefully, we are putting to bed the discussions about this for the foreseeable future. Of course, we are referring to the new lease at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. You were there for the signing of the lease.
Yes, it's official. It's done. Nobody has to worry anymore. They're here.
Yeah. I saw a comment as we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So keep your comments going and we will address as many as we can. I saw a comment off the top about hopefully this is real. We've been fooled before. I remember, obviously, back in September, the Memorandum of Understanding, the non-binding MOU.
During a clinching game, it was a very fun time for all of us.
Yes, very confusing as well as the details came out about what exactly they had agreed upon. That was non-binding. That was not a real lease being signed. This is. They have literally used the ink to sign the lease.
I have seen the lease. It's signed on paper. It's official.
So let's get to specifically the lease itself, because obviously that MOU mentioned 30 years of the Orioles staying at Camden Yards. As some great reporting on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe for $1 for 6 months. Pamela Wood and Andy Koska in particular, as well as you, Danielle, and Kyle Goon, and some great pieces about what exactly this lease contains. And off the top, we knew that the Orioles CEO and chairman John Angelos wanted to get the land around Camden Yards, specifically a couple parking lots, the warehouse, and just some general areas between Camden Yards and M&T Bank Stadium. He wanted to have control of that to be able to develop.
Right. He wanted to create kind of like the Battery in Atlanta, or in San Diego, the Gaslamp District around the stadium, where you can go to a bar before the game, you go to a restaurant, you can, go out to dinner with your family and sort of make it a whole day downtown, and then he would see the revenue from it.
Right.
He didn't get that in the initial lease, but there are 4 more years where they can negotiate it and maybe set that up for later on.
Right. And it's something that, the Governor Wes Moore talked about wanting to use that land to better the city. He talked about promises being made of the Orioles being able to contribute to bringing people downtown in sort of a way where when the Inner Harbor was revitalized, decades ago, that was able to bring more tourism and help the city itself.
Right.
So that's the hope when you have that kind of land at your disposal. And that was what John Angelos was hoping to acquire. And like you said, his dream isn't dead,
right,
but it certainly hit a road bump because he was not just handed the 99-year land grant that he was expecting and was in the original part of the lease that was going to get agreed to a couple weeks ago before that hit a speed bump.
Yeah, and the speed bump there, it was the rumors about David Rubenstein potentially buying the team. Right. So that's what held up the lease in the latest holdup. So we're not quite sure what's going to happen there and what's going to happen to sale.
Right.
They say the team's not for sale, but things change quickly in its sphere.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have done a lot of research on David Rubenstein himself. What have you learned about the billionaire and maybe why he would be interested in owning a team like the Orioles?
Right. So he grew up in Baltimore. His dad was a mailman, very blue collar family. He got rich in private equity. He and a couple co-founders started a business, the Carly Group. They went worldwide. They had a lot of controversies, but they also, made a ton of money along the way. But he's had
those two going hand in hand.
They really do. He's had a special interest in sports his whole life. Grew up a baseball player. Has a bunch of sports owners in his back pocket. His friends. He's tried to buy the Nationals before. Ted Leonis, who owns the Wizards and the Capitals and the Mystics. Mm-hmm. He has expressed interest in the Orioles before, very briefly in some private meetings, and now his name has been coming up with the Orioles.
Got it. Yeah, and obviously some Orioles fans, when that report came out a couple weeks ago, jumped at the opportunity to prematurely celebrate the potential sale of the Orioles and the potential transfer of ownership, of the majority ownership, which is about 75% that the Angelos family currently holds. But so far as we know, that report that came out a couple weeks ago has not led to anything immediate,
Right.
and certainly may have done some damage to John Angelos's case in terms of being able to have a lease that would give him more access to areas around Camden Yards. But so far as we know, a sale is not even close to imminent.
And one of the stipulations of the lease that they talked about yesterday in these public meetings was if the team is sold, the terms of the lease carry over to the new owners.
Right.
So that was something that they needed to iron out too.
Absolutely, because you don't want to sign, if you're a city official, a state official, you don't want to sign a deal, especially of that length that could go up to 30 years or more, with an owner that you don't know is going to be in place long term.
Yeah, exactly.
So looking forward, now that they have this lease locked down, biggest acquisition of the offseason, I think you could say,
by far, yes.
by the
But
Orioles.
It's not much competition for them.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that there are a couple ways when we look back at this saga that you can take it. I think one positive that you could say certainly is that it got done. And for all the rumors that, we had been reporting on the BaltimoreBanner.com were pretty baseless of them potentially wanting to move to Nashville.
Right.
You can put those to bed, at least for the next 15 years.
Yes. And there are lease extensions beyond that.
Right. So that is put to bed, and you are not going to see, at least in the next 15 years, what you just saw or what may go on in Washington, where the team is looking to move out of a city, not just relocate an entire city, to a different part of the country, but also to change venues and leave the downtown area. The Orioles are going to stay downtown, and from what we can tell, the state and the team are committed to revitalizing, making it as John Angelos likes to say, work, play, live, 365 area. But at least on the positive side, you could say they did follow through on that promise that they are going to stay at this ballpark for the long term.
And there are plans to renovate the stadium, and a lot of things are kind of desperately needed. I mean, everybody complains about the sound system and the video board. Both of those are on the list of things to be renovated. Also on the list, details are very vague, but they want to, add some bars, maybe in left field, which is oftentimes closed in the middle of summer because there's not enough fans there. They want to, get rid of the press box and put in, fancy club seating there. There's a big...
Not get rid of it, just move it.
They want to move us out of the way, yeah. So
no press whatsoever.
So the fancy people can pay more and they can make money. They're gonna renovate the clubhouses, which are desperately needed. I've been in a lot of clubhouses around the league, and they are very far behind with the amenities that they can offer players. So. Those are just sort of kind of surface level things that they have listed out right now. They haven't released a plan or talked more about it, but I think we'll be hearing more soon.
Yeah, it is the $600 million that the state had promised back during the Hogan administration that the Orioles are now going to get access to, and they can use that money to redevelop and revitalize not just Camden Yards itself, but quote unquote the Camden Yards complex.
Right.
So taking that $600 million, we've already seen now at M&T Bank Stadium what the Ravens plan to do with a lot of their money. And I was at that press conference where they announced that they're having somewhat of a concert venue outside the stadium.
Right.
They're going to revitalize the concourse. They're going to open up the concourse. I'm sure that press conference and those plans will be coming at some point for the Orioles.
Who knows when, though, to be honest.
But the fact that it took this long, we talk about the positive sides, and there are certainly a lot of positives to be gained from the outcome of this. I think most fans would say they were just frustrated with how we got there.
Right.
Because it was very public. Obviously, it was not something that you want to learn about as an Orioles fan. You'd rather not find out about how the sausage is made.
Right.
And fans were kind of dragged along through this entire process. And especially the public proclamations like the MOU. Right. It just led to a situation where fans, I think, felt they weren't getting the complete truth at times. And fans at least had some cause for concern with this December 31st deadline. It was something that probably should not have led to as much controversy as it did. And ultimately it got done. but it was just the process that led to it, I think, was frustrating for fans.
I think also just the lack of transparency. We
Exactly.
never heard from John Angelos in this process. He was not even there yesterday for the press conference or the signing of the lease of the stadium for the team that he owns. He
Right.
didn't make an appearance. They didn't have anybody from the Orioles speaking publicly yesterday. So I think it just kind of gave fans a bit of a sour taste. Maybe John Angelos didn't get everything he wanted, but the team is staying in Baltimore, and that's kind of the most important part at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And that's what they set out to do. That's what they wanted to do. But like you said, Danielle, it's something that we heard a lot from John Angelos throughout the year about what he wanted to do. And it was a lot of vague plans and not a lot of concrete answers. And now we at least have a concrete document that stipulates that this team is going to be here and that this team is going to do its best to work closely with the state and with the city to revitalize that area. Danielle, we've been talking for 11 minutes about the lease. Do you think we can officially move on to baseball talk?
Yes, please. Let's talk baseball.
So the Orioles, Mike Elias is still doing his job up in the warehouse. He has not been kicked out of the warehouse,
as far as we know.
As far as we know. He made a trade yesterday, acquiring Jonathan Heasley from the Royals in exchange for I believe, pitcher that pitched in the Dominican Summer League last year. So a very minor move. It's one of those moves that the Orioles tend to make every offseason. It's essentially a trade for cash considerations type deal. We don't know if Jonathan Heasley will be a part of this team, but if he is, you would expect it to be in the bullpen in 2024.
I do. Maybe a depth starter role. He does have an option, which I think will help him out. I see him being a shuttle guy, to be honest. I mean, I see him going back and forth between AAA and the Orioles. I see him, maybe being a long reliever in the bullpen, maybe kind of filling those early innings. But as of right now, just with the stats that we've seen, maybe the Orioles have a different plan. But just sort of the way he pitched in Kansas City, I don't see him being, a huge part of this team this season.
Yeah, last year, 12 games, just 15 innings pitched, a 7.20 ERA. Now, he had experience as a starter, like you said, Danielle, in 2022. Started 21 games for a 5.28 ERA. This is a classic Mike Elias move, just because it is a very buy low situation. And surely his analytics department, like by Sig Mejdal, has probably seen something in what Jonathan Heasley brings to the table. Heasley's going to turn 27 in just a couple weeks. And so it will be his age 27 season next year. Low risk. But this team is going to have to start taking, and as John Mioli has written on the BaltimoreBanner.com several times, this team is going to have to start taking some bigger risks to improve upon their 101 win season last year.
And I mean, this move doesn't fill the need that they need. They need a starting pitcher. And, while bullpen depth is great and you can never have too much, it doesn't actually help them moving forward that much right now.
And if you are going to get bullpen depth, I would say aim higher than Jonathan Heasley.
Yes.
I think there are a lot of interesting relievers still out there. Free agency, Wandy Peralta is still out there. They're out of the market for Josh Hader after they've signed Craig Kimbrell in terms of a closer.
Right.
But Robert Stevenson, some of these guys, Hector Neris, some of these guys that I think could fill in important roles in the 7th, 8th inning.
As a somewhat affordable option. I mean, 10, 15 million.
Yeah.
They could pay that.
Absolutely. There's also trade options, obviously. They have the number one farm system. So bullpen depth, I still think, is a need after acquiring Craig Kimbrell.
Agree.
And even Jonathan Heasley. But you mentioned starting pitcher.
Yes.
That's still priority number one, and I think it is in Mike Elias' mind as well.
And I think at this point, we're not going to see a big free agent signing. I mean, we're not going to see them dish out probably 4 to 5 years, $60 million for a pitcher, which is what they would have to pay somebody. So I think right now, their best bet is to, have to give up some of their prize prospects and trade for that starting pitcher.
Right. Some names, obviously, that are still out there that we saw the comptroller of Maryland throw out there on her Twitter feed.
Yes.
Blake Snell.
And in her speeches,
Yeah. She specifically mentioned that the Orioles could use a veteran starting pitcher.
Yeah.
She's not wrong.
No.
I think she would align with a lot of Orioles fans in that way. Obviously, Jordan Montgomery is still out there. They're not going to be interested in Yamamoto, who is probably deciding between the Yankees and the Mets.
Yeah, he's going to a big market team.
Yeah, he's going to get paid quite a lot. Blake Snell is obviously still out there. Until the Orioles, I've said it before, but until the Orioles show us that they're willing to sign a player to a guaranteed multi-year contract, I just find it hard to believe that they're going to do so. We've seen some interesting names come off the board, though, as well.
Mhm.
I thought Michael Waka was a potential good fit for this rotation.
Agree, yeah.
He was taken off the board. You've seen some of these middling starting pitchers. Eduardo Rodriguez, who was probably at the top of the second tier, maybe in terms of free agents. He was taken
But
off the
again,
board.
he got a long-term deal.
Right.
Mhm.
And how willing are the Orioles to hand out a contract of that length? We have yet to find out.
We haven't seen it, so
Right. So if they were to go the trade route, some guys that keep having their names brought up, Dylan Cease, I think, is the priority at the top of a lot of Orioles fans' minds. Great season 2 years ago, less than stellar last year. But what's key, I think, is he is under contract not just in 2024, but in 2025. Well,
yeah, and that gives him, a little bit of lead room right there. It gives him the chance, maybe Felix Bautista's out for all of next year. Maybe you keep DL Hall or Tyler Wells in the bullpen for next year, and then, when they need him, move him back in 25. It gives them more options, the more control that they have there.
right. You look at this rotation right now. I mean, if you were to go into next year with the same type group, where you have, Kyle Bradish probably starting opening day, Grayson Rodriguez behind him. You have John Means, who hopefully is going to be healthy for as long as possible.
But I do think he would be on an inning limit.
Right.
Just coming off for Tommy John.
Yeah. And especially, we saw him not even be able to stay healthy enough to make the postseason.
Right.
roster.
Which is normal in a Tommy John recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a Tommy John recovery that hit a setback as well over the course of last year. And prior to the Tommy John, he has had significant over the course of his career. He's really only your guaranteed lefty because beyond him, you have the two righties at the top of the rotation, we're assuming. And then beyond Means, anchoring in the middle, you have Dean Kramer and you have Tyler Wells, who was their best starter for the first half of last season.
And we don't know where he's going to be next year.
Right.
We don't know if he's going to be in a rotation.
And I think, honestly, if the Orioles were to acquire another starting pitcher, he would probably be the first one out.
Agree. Yes.
And because we just have not seen Dean Kramer be used in the bullpen at all, really, over the course of his big league career.
I think he's one of those guys who's just a starter.
Right.
That's just what his makeup is.
But you do feel good if you have, injuries over the course of the season. You're going to lose somebody for some amount of time.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah. That Tyler Wells could be your spot starter.
Right. And Cole Irvin, he is what he is, but he can be a spot starter too.
Right. He can be, and especially as a lefty. But if you were to acquire another starting pitcher, you bump Tyler Wells to the bullpen. You just feel much more solidified as a starting five. And having Wells in that bullpen maybe solves the problem potentially of more bullpen depth as well.
I mean, I really liked him in the bullpen last year. I thought he looked really confident. I thought he kind of enjoyed that position maybe more than he let on. But I think that is a good fit for him. It's the way to get him through a full major league season.
Right. He was certainly understandably frustrated when he was sent back down, not just to AAA, but to AA.
Yes. It was an interesting choice there.
Yeah. Right in the middle of the season, he had a couple rough starts and then gets sent back down. But hopefully he is back to, himself in 2024. But beyond that group, I mean, DL Hall, I think, still potentially a dark horse to eventually start games for this team.
I don't see it.
Really?
I see him in the bullpen too.
I mean, I think right now, if you're making the team and you're deciding what you have for opening day, he would go in my opening day bullpen. I just don't know if the team is ready to give up on the idea of somebody with that kind of stuff, a lefty, just yet. The prize prospect that he was a few years ago was projected to be near the top end of a rotation arm. And I know the last couple of years have certainly changed his trajectory.
Right.
But I just feel like they might not be ready to give up on him.
Honestly, the way the Orioles work, I think they're going to toy with the idea all spring training. They're going to say he's in contention to be in rotation. They're going to put him with the starter group. He's going to throw bullpens. He's going to start spring training games. It's going to come to a time where they're going to announce the roster, and he's going to be in the bullpen.
Right. Yeah, and you would rather have him there, I think, for 2024, being an impact reliever in the bullpen than what he was last year, which was starting games in AAA.
Right. And again, I mean, he's one of those guys where maybe big league starting is just not for him.
Right.
And that's okay. Maybe that was the trajectory. And obviously that changed last year when he spent half the season in Sarasota. But again, if it's a way to keep him in the majors all season, I say don't fight it.
Right. And he is somebody that has struggled with his command. The stuff has always been there. To get the most out of him, they just need to keep his walk rate down.
Right.
And it plagued him in AAA last year. He came up to the big leagues, and he did fairly well. I mean, he was striking out a ton of guys. We only saw a couple months sample size, but his velocity, which you wrote about having dipped at the midpoint of last season, he went down to Sarasota, he figured some stuff out, and he came back and his velocity had ticked back up.
Right. I mean, he was a totally different pitcher when he came back. And, also, in Sarasota, he was regaining strength. He basically had a spring training in the middle of the season. And that was the way he was able to revive the season. But he also, he had to get his mental side in check. That was a big part of it. He was so frustrated by this injury that he had suffered that he was letting it impact, his whole body and his mechanics.
Right. Exactly. So looking at this team right now, they have a hole at starting pitcher, could probably use more bullpen depth. The number of starting pitchers and relievers out there in free agency is still very high.
Yes.
And I expect the Orioles to get back involved in that. It's December 19th. It feels like things have been a little bit slow since the signing of Shohei Ohtani. Maybe once Yamamoto decides where he's going to play, that will speed things up. But I expect the Orioles to make a move at the most inconvenient time for all of our schedules.
Probably Christmas Eve.
Eve. New Year's at like 12:01.
Of course, yes.
Right in the middle of a Ravens game, probably. So, Mike, please, be mindful of our 9 to 5 work schedule during the off season. That'll just about do it for our live chat today. Danielle, where can the people find you on Twitter and X?
On Twitter at D_Allentuck.
And I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. And Danielle has you completely covered, along with Andy Koska and Kyle Goon and all of our incredible sports staff on the BaltimoreBanner.com. We will continue to monitor the Orioles offseason as it goes along. Thanks so much for everybody for tuning in, and we'll see